Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to you all here tonight and to be joined by my wonderful colleagues when we talk a little bit about what I thought we should maybe try to make the theme of tonight's conversation, which is artificial intelligence and human wisdom. I'm joined tonight in this conversation by Shannon, Vallor, and Baillie, both eminent researchers in their own field, and I'll invite them to very briefly introduce themselves. Shannon, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Shannon Vallor. I am the Baillie Gifford Chair in the Ethics of Data and Artificial Intelligence at the University of Edinburgh, where I also direct the Centre for Technomoral Futures in the Edinburgh Futures Institute.
Hi, I'm Kenneth Baillie. I'm Professor of Experimental Medicine at the University of Edinburgh. I co-direct the Baillie Gifford Pandemic Science Hub, and I practice clinically as an intensive care doctor in the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh.
Thank you. I want to start by looking back a little bit, quite far back. Over 300 years ago, humanity entered the Age of Enlightenment, and all of what happened there was built around the idea of understanding the world and our place in it through the lens of human reason. The new ideas the Enlightenment presented led not only to a philosophical, but also to a scientific, to an industrial, and many social revolutions that radically transformed society, our economy, and ultimately also what it means to be human. Fast forward to the 1940s, 50s, around 75 years ago, artificial intelligence emerged as the vision of using digital computers to understand and replicate, one day, human reason. From its early beginnings, AI has been a discipline that has captured the human imagination, inspiring sometimes utopian, sometimes dystopian, and sometimes hopefully also realistic visions of the future. But I think it's fair to say the public debate around AI has never been as intense as it is today, at a time when we are witnessing enormous advances in the field. And at the same time, we're also witnessing an unrelenting search for answers around the question of what AI holds for our future. The university has not only shaped the ideas of the Age of Enlightenment and the evolution of AI for many, many years, it's also always been at the very center of these debates. And tonight, the theme I would like to explore is whether we're about to enter a new age in human civilization that may be characterized by the confluence of human and artificial intelligence, and whether, against the backdrop of many global challenges and a very complex geopolitical situation, rather than just intelligence, we might look at something that might lead to a new form of collective human wisdom. And we want to talk a little bit about what the university is doing to navigate that journey, both in terms of how AI is transforming our own work and in terms of how our work keeps shaping the debates around our AI future as a species. So, as an AI researcher, I would naturally start by talking to all of you about all the wonderful things we're doing in computer science and AI and schools like my school, Informatics. But I think it might be more interesting to start with somebody who can offer the perspective of one area that we all very much care about, which is our health, our future. We are all looking at a future where we will end up requiring health care and health and care, I should say. And I wanted to start, Kenny, by talking about your work in medical research and to ask you to reflect on what I might be tempted to call the Edinburgh way. We pride ourselves in working across the disciplines, and ultimately the advances of AI will only bring benefits through applications in other areas. So I wanted to start by asking, what impact has this working at Edinburgh had on the way you think about your research and the opportunities you see around using technology and AI in medical research?
Well, I think Edinburgh is different from other places I've worked in that, as you and Sir Peter said, we work across disciplines, very effectively. So I spent time working at Harvard and MIT in the past, and I saw people literally hiding their research from the person in the office next door. I haven't seen that happen in Edinburgh. It's a university that has, for whatever reason, leadership, culture, or history, it has a genuinely collegiate atmosphere. And so I, as a doctor, can walk into the Informatics Institute and meet people there and say, I've got a problem, and they want to help. And we work very seamlessly across disciplines. I think the potential for healthcare of AI clearly applies across a vast range of areas. There are lots of jobs that are currently done by humans that can be done possibly in the future by machines. But of course, there are jobs that are currently done, in most cases, pretty well by humans. So that might make things more efficient, maybe slightly better. I think what will really be transformative will be using AI to do things that humans can't do. For example, to find treatments for diseases that we can't currently treat. And the need for interdisciplinary work is really clear in that area, because there are billion-dollar research institutes working on AI, trying to apply it to healthcare and biology now, and they tend to follow the pattern: if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So trying to treat biological data as if it's English language. So to train models in the same way that ChatGPT was trained to try to understand the genome. And there are fundamental biological reasons why that can't work. And so having a really deep dialogue with informatics researchers about that, I think, has to be the way to a solution.
And that's really the approach we're taking, for example, with our generative AI lab, where we want to do work on really understanding, for example, what these models like ChatGPT can't do in other areas, but we also want to work with people who understand a domain like genomics or population health data, and really make us also kind of do the right thing there and kind of acknowledge that each of these areas can be quite different. So there are big collaborations that have had a lot of impact. For example, your work that Sir Peter mentioned around COVID, that was a large-scale collaborative project that had really brought some impressive results, but and where data played a key role, but also working across the disciplines was very important.
Yeah, so we found a treatment for COVID that was effective using human genomics, which is the first time that has ever happened in any infectious disease or any critical illness. We did it extremely fast by comparing the genomes of people who were desperately sick with COVID with the rest of the population, and we found a handful of genetic clues. But that's just the start. That's just the beginning of trying to understand the disease. There's a very long distance from the genome, which is the code that makes all of us, that's present in almost every cell in your body. There are an unfathomable range of molecular and cellular events that then occur between that genetic code and a disease, something that changes in the whole organism. And so we combined data using computational biology from an additional signal which revealed one of the molecular consequences of those genetic variations. And it happened to point to a particular protein in a particular cell type that was active in the lung. Now, that was very lucky that we had that data, but that suggested to us that if we were able to inhibit that protein with a drug, we could make people better. And again, by very good fortune, there was already a drug which was used to treat psoriasis that would have that effect. Mm-hmm. So within a week of making that discovery, we had included that drug in a clinical trial, and we proved that it was effective, ultimately saving, I think, tens of thousands of lives around the world.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure many people in the audience will be hearing the sorts of things that come out of the big tech companies and, for example, protein folding, new algorithms to solve immensely complex computational problems, the kind of thing I understand. I don't know what's in these proteins, but they're long lists of strings of letters that are very, very complicated, three-dimensional. So we hear of these successes, but there is also a clear sense that, well, on the one hand, you need to work with the clinicians, you need to work with the researchers and with the health system to actually translate these things into practical benefits. And I think that's where universities and our collaboration with civil society, with the NHS, with regulators and so on is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the really big difference between biomedical science and language, training ChatGPT, is that we have been recording our thoughts for a long time, and the language you use to do that is very effective, and so you can train a language model by looking at everything that's ever been written by humans. In biology, we haven't looked at most of the molecular events that happen in humans or any other organisms. Mm-hmm. So we have barely dipped our toe in the water of the molecular events that we would need to understand in order to create a model of, a complete model of all of biology. So in order to make progress, we're going to have to use shortcuts to find the right data in the most relevant places, which requires biological expertise. And we're going to have to leverage the power of AI to recognize patterns across multiple organisms, which clearly requires a synthesis of expertise from different fields.
Yeah, and it's really important, I think, to also never forget that the applications of AI, that there's so many different areas. I mean, everybody nowadays thinks of generative AI and ChatGPT and just people talking to chatbots, but we have people who work on trying to get robotic help in the operating theater, or people who think about self-driving cars, or sending robots to space, or even use them in other areas like journalism or artistic creation and so on. So I think that's really, really important. The area of health and care, of course, is one where data is particularly sensitive. We've all heard of previous scandals and controversies around that data being shared with companies and so on. And that brings me to Shannon and your work around AI and data ethics. And right now, there's quite a lot of, I'd almost characterize it as noise. A lot of it is noise in the media around speculating around how AI might substitute human intelligence, it might achieve or surpass human intelligence. But so far, the AI systems that are the subject of so much hype and public interest, as you, I think, rightly point out, don't really exhibit any intelligence or let alone wisdom, and just mimic ours, as you've argued in your great book, the AI Mirror. So, switching gears a little bit, given what's happening right now in the world of AI and in the debate around it, what do you think needs to happen to turn what we now have as a technology, but also as a societal framing around it, to start and maybe develop that sort of wisdom where machines maybe play a role, but that we're still in control of?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think there's a couple of things here. One is obviously to begin to separate and filter out the hype from the AI ecosystem, which is really difficult to do when there's a commercial incentive to produce and disseminate hype. But it's leading to a great deal of public misunderstanding of what AI can do for people, what it can't, what it shouldn't, and what sort of things we have reason to be concerned about, and what sort of fears are really kind of exaggerated science fiction that we really need to look at with appropriate skepticism. And it's very difficult to sort that out on the commercial landscape, and also on the political landscape, where AI is becoming invested with geopolitical significance more and more every few months. So I think it falls to researchers within universities to kind of hold the line on the kind of grounded reality, the evidence-driven approach to understanding AI and using AI well. And that's something I think that Edinburgh does brilliantly, is that we take a very positive approach to AI, but one that doesn't see AI as magic, doesn't see AI as a kind of way around the hard problems, but rather a tool that actually amplifies the ability of the knowledge that we're already producing to have positive effects in the world. So that's the goal. Now, I think to do that, though, you have to bring together forms of expertise that in many universities are siloed and really kept from cross-pollinating effectively. And one of the reasons I came to Edinburgh was what you mentioned, the culture of Edinburgh allowing for this kind of interdisciplinarity. So just to give you an example, the center that I direct at the Edinburgh Futures Institute, which is called the Center for Technomoral Futures, which is a mouthful. But the idea is that there are certain kinds of problems that we cannot solve today without combining technical and moral expertise. And that doesn't mean letting computer scientists build something and then let an ethicist throw stones at it. It means actually bringing these forms of expertise together from the very beginning and allowing that knowledge to actually weave itself into something that builds a technology that can be both powerful and beneficial. And so we have at the center core staff in philosophy, myself, where we bring the kind of ethics expertise and kind of, some of the sort of political wisdom and historical perspectives. But we also have a Chancellor's Fellow in Responsible Machine Learning, whose school is Informatics, who looks at the technical side of this. We bring people together from law and the social sciences, and then we work together with our PhD researchers and other colleagues to actually do things that you literally cannot do in any other university where these forms of knowledge are walled off from one another. So we have, I'll just talk about a couple of our PhD students who work on problems like, how do you develop algorithms to distribute scarce healthcare resources like kidneys or livers in a way that will be seen as democratic, fair, and publicly acceptable? Okay, you can't do that by just building an algorithm and deciding that it's fair. You have to bring clinicians to the table. You have to bring patients to the table. You have to actually begin to understand what it means for a process to be democratic, right? There's a whole bunch of forms of expertise that go into solving that problem that live in a very scattered way across most universities. So the ability to use a building like the Edinburgh Futures Institute to bring people together, and that's the other piece, is that we actually sit together. So a lot of interdisciplinary centers actually don't have a place to work together. We have an open plan space that houses the Center for Technomoral Futures, which has, at any given time, 10 PhD students being supervised by multiple disciplinary experts. And then our core researchers and affiliates from across the university. But it's not just us alone. Within our same working space, our ward in the old Royal Infirmary, we have the Generative AI Lab, which is based in informatics. We have one of the CDTs that Peter spoke about in AI, that is CDT for Responsible Natural Language Processing. They sit with us too. And another research program that I lead that's funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council called BRAID, Bridging Responsible AI Divides, which sits across the Edinburgh College of Art and the School of Philosophy, Psychology, and Language Sciences. We occupy the same space too. So we have these 4 different programs cross-pollinating and solving problems in the same space in a way that I have not seen replicated at any other university on the planet.
And the fact that we are sitting here and we are from entirely different disciplines, but there is also another dimension that, as Sir Peter mentioned, with the city deal City Region deal and the institutes, the innovation institutes that were established around that. The Edinburgh Futures Institute, the Bay Centre, which I used to be director of, which sits more on the technical side around robotics and AI and data science, and the Usher Institute in medicine and population health sciences, but also our friends who I believe are not here tonight from Easter Bush, according to Bill Gates, the best place in the world to do anything around animals, food and agri-tech. And so the fact that I think this is another change that has happened and really reflects how universities are changing in the modern world, which is that we became much more outward-facing and that we established these institutes to work with external organizations, with government, with industry. Who would have thought that, 20 years ago, I was certainly not thinking about applying my work in financial services or in the public sector. And I don't know whether you would have thought about, creating a course for small and medium enterprises to learn about ethics and regulation in AI and data. So I think there's some really quite profound transformation happening there. Now, many people, when it comes to AI, are obviously concerned, and rightly concerned, about many things that they're hearing about and that they could see happen in the future. And of course, we also live in a world that is kind of fraught with geopolitical tensions, and where AI is also very much dominated by big tech. So people see a lot of risks for climate and the sustainability, for social justice, democracy, employment. There's almost no end to that list. What do you think we can do as universities, as centers of learning and research, to contribute to that debate and try to influence outcomes so the world gets the most out of AI?
Well, there's a few things I think we're doing already. So one of the things that we're very proud of at EFI is we have a master's program in the ethics of data and artificial intelligence that primarily draws students who are actually already working in industry, in government, in the third sector, who want to upskill on the ethics and governance of these tools that they're working with. A lot of them are data scientists, or they're working in, maybe they're working on the regulatory side and compliance, or maybe they're working on a social research side. But they're increasingly finding within their organizations that they don't have the resources to understand how to use these technologies in a way that's not going to create more risk for the organization, that's not going to do harm to their customers or stakeholders, that's not going to leave them unprepared for whatever regulatory changes might come. So they're putting actually a great deal of pressure on the university sector to help fill this gap. And that's really difficult when you just come to professors who have to teach their courses and say, help me solve this problem. And we do some of this. So for example, one of the things we recently did is help contribute to a competition that Scottish Government ran to have local councils propose different applications of AI that they wanted support for piloting and carrying out, and everything from involving transportation applications or things that the different NHS trusts in Scotland wanted to try. And they actually came to us and asked for help giving ethics reviews for the proposals to see which of them were quite risky, and to give the applicants for those proposals guidance on how to de-risk their applications and put better governance in place, versus applications that maybe didn't present much of an ethical risk, so that the judging panel could feel more confident about those. So that was a really great thing to do.
And a real synergy there between the different disciplines, and also looking at one of the areas that is most high risk. I mean,
yeah. But it's hard to scale that, right? Mm-hmm. But what we do with a master's program is we create 30 people a year with that expertise who can then go out and bring it to their organizations and spread it. So I think that's what universities can do, is begin to build the pipeline for this kind of multidisciplinary expertise, and then allow that to multiply and really shape the conversation in a way that it's hard for one or two experts in a university to do.
Yeah, and that's a perfect cue for me to just also mention we train more people in AI from at all levels, from undergrad to PhD, and its overlap with other disciplines than any other UK university. I always say these things not because also because we're proud of it, but also sometimes when we speak to some of our friends in the south of the country, they can't even believe that such a thing could be possible in the far Arctic north of the island. So, Kenny, I wanted to ask you, I'm sure you've come across a lot of difficult conversations around the ethics of using AI in biomedical science and also in the practice of health and care. To me, it always seems like there is a lot we can learn from the kind of frameworks and practices our medical colleagues have developed around ethics. And of course, there are new challenges coming out of AI. But do you find that people are worried? I mean, and what are they worried about? I mean, I'm worried about NHS England being shut down, for example, or hearing of government efficiencies and pressures on the NHS. And I'm less worried about the research you and your colleagues do, which is kind of, where the guardrails are heavy and so on. Where do you think, how do you think, are we ready to navigate those impacts?
Well, we're certainly doing our best, and actually, I've benefited greatly from having access to Shannon and her team and the ability to talk through, when you speak to a philosopher about these problems, they think of it in sort of 10 different levels that you've not really considered before. So thinking through the risks, I think it is fair to say that the theoretical risks of applying AI in biology are substantial, and we will have to be very careful to make sure that we mitigate them. I think we can't say right now that that mankind will be able to do that. So I suppose that one of the risks that Shannon and I have discussed, if you mentioned our colleagues at Easter Bush, who might well have a much more beneficial impact on humanity than anything that any of my colleagues in medicine will ever do. I mean, curing disease is all very well, but if you could make a chicken that would survive in Africa and would produce the same sort of yield that chickens do in the West, you provide such an impact on global nutrition that it would make the world a much better place. But of course, the technology that you would need to do that would essentially it would relate to designing an organism, so making changes to the genome of an organism and predicting what the consequences will be. And if you extend that, to its conclusion, that could enable you to design an organism that could be very harmful. And I think placing guardrails is one way to protect against that. But I think you're right. We will have to. One thing that we've discussed doing is we're learning from medicine, and just as we lock down clinical data so that it can't be accessed by anyone who's not properly approved, and all the access is supervised. So we in the Usher Institute, which you mentioned, we have computer systems where there's a camera on the screen of the researcher recording their activity, so that not only is the computer itself locked down, but actually their keystrokes and whatever they do on the screen is recorded as well. Those sorts of security tools might well be necessary if we're going to be creating AI tools that could create designer organisms.
If I can add to that, I think one of the things that people who work with AI, particularly in potentially high-risk applications or really in complex systems, understand that AI is something that amplifies our power as humans. It allows us to do things that we literally could not do without it. But it also allows us to amplify our capacity to do certain things better. But at the same time, there's a misconception, I think, out there in many circles that somehow adding AI into the system reduces the demands on human intelligence, right? That it means that, we don't actually need as much human intelligence in the system anymore. And there's a great paper from 1983 written by an engineer called Ironies of Automation. And this engineer, Lisanne Bainbridge, basically punctured this myth very early on in one of the kind of early AI springs, long before this one, said, there's this misconception that as you add degrees of automation into a system that you'll be able to decrease the level of human intelligence in the system. And she says exactly the opposite will be true. The more you're automating, the more complexity of the task that you're automating, the more the demand for human intelligence will go up. And it may not be demand going up in terms of net labor hours of a human that you need working in that system, but the cognitive capabilities that you need from that human will actually go up. And I think the example you're giving of how do you manage the complexities of high-risk but high-yield biomedical research using AI, that requires combinations of expertise that we don't have research degrees that deliver that, right? You actually have to put new combinations of skills together, new kinds of expertise together that haven't been brought together before. And then you have to have students who have the kind of cognitive skills, the kind of cognitive flexibility to shift, for example, from a quantitative mindset to a qualitative mindset, or to be able to use multiple different methods, to use participatory methods to actually understand how people will interact with the system, but then also have the technical expertise to understand what are the constraints around what people want and what we can actually deliver. And we have been for a long time educating students across the world in increasingly narrow ways, where we actually don't encourage them to develop that kind of flexibility, that kind of multimodal expertise where they have different toolkits and different methodologies drawn from different disciplines that they know how to use, or if they can't use them, that they know how to speak to the other people in the area who do have that expertise so that they can collaborate effectively across disciplines. So that's what I think is so important about what we do at the Edinburgh Futures Institute and what we do across the university, actually, is encourage that kind of flexibility, adaptability, and the ability to kind of bring the level of human intelligence up. And that's what I think you're gesturing at when you talk about wisdom, right? To go beyond just, I have a very narrow skill and I'm very good at deploying that skill, to I have a pretty wide grasp of the range of skill and knowledge that's needed to do this thing well. And I know what my piece of it is, and I know where the rest of that expertise lives and how to bring it in.
And a lot of what we're hearing really kind of goes against that spirit that you've just described, because as you have often pointed out in other presentations, we have usually seen great successes and benefits from AI where we let the AI do something we cannot do that was usually pretty specific and was something like finding that protein among a billion of possibilities to help cure a disease. And yet we're hearing all the time that AI is here to substitute us. And even in some areas where people are rightly concerned. I mean, I'm just reminded of the silent song or album that 1,000 artists recently recorded in protest of their creative output being used by AI companies to train systems and to maybe then potentially create some creative output that is artificial and doesn't offer them any compensation or acknowledgement and recognition.
Yeah.
So how do you think, I mean, the university is, of course, a place of learning and a place where we produce knowledge. What do you think are what are we up against as universities in that context?
I think one of the things we're up against is a commercial push to devalue human knowledge, actually, and to devalue human agency. And the companies that are pushing that have a very clear business model that requires people to believe that that's actually inevitable, that humans are simply going to be surpassed by these machines, so you might as well use them for everything, right? And you might as well throw all your investments towards us because we're the future, Humanity's not the future. AI is the future. That's patently false because we understand the limits of AI and what it can't do without human intelligence and wisdom around it. But also, even if it weren't false, right, it's an incredibly inhumane and dangerous vision of the future that we ought to resist. So I look, for example, at the difference between what we're talking about, the ability to use AI to find a treatment for a disease that in 1,000 years we'd never find on our own, versus OpenAI advertising this week that they have an AI model that's great at creative writing. Well, you know what? People are great at creative writing. Really great at creative writing. And they enjoy it. And they use it to articulate experiences and meanings in society that we share with one another, right? So what is the argument for having AI do our creative writing for us? It's something that we're good at, it's something that brings us intrinsic value, and it's something that has meaning for us. And it's not something that we need AI to be doing, right? So I think what we can do in universities is really invest in the kinds of uses of AI that actually enhance the human condition, bring our agency further into its kind of maturity, and that allow us in the meanwhile to, take those focused areas where human cognitive limits are never going to go further and allow AI to get us there. We can do both things. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be AI's everywhere and you have to accept it everywhere in your life as a replacement for you. Or we have to hate AI and fear it and decide that it's the enemy. We need to avoid both of those extremes. And I think the kind of work that we do is really about finding that more nuanced and that wiser path.
Mm-hmm. And I think, obviously, as universities, we are just as exposed to this disruption as anybody else, and we are trying, as Sir Peter mentioned, we are working through these issues and discussing them, and those are often difficult conversations. We are being asked by the outside world, are all your students cheating? No. They must learn how to use AI, but they must also understand how to not use it. They must use it to grow and learn and develop those new skills. I'm just thinking about, I was just going to ask you, what do you think the next generation of researchers in your area, for example, how they will work? Do you have any thoughts on what will change?
Well, I mean, I think there are predictable changes, and then beyond a certain point, there are things it will get unpredictable. I think there are already use of ChatGPT, particularly the latest versions with deep research, is saving a lot of time for researchers who use it, and opens up a more efficient way to consume the scientific literature than we've ever had before. So I think those tools will become ubiquitous. I think it's been the case for a long time that we've increasingly trained our students, even in pure biological disciplines, to understand quantitative methodologies and computational science. And I think literacy in those methodologies will continue to be important, even in a world where AI can do lots of those things for us. Understanding what the machines are doing and critically being able to evaluate the veracity of what you're being told or what a model is doing will be essential skills for our students.
Yeah, and it's I'm also really excited about this idea of accelerating research and science and making doing the science easier in the program that I'm leading on, experimenting with different things we could use at the university. One of the pilot projects is around how we can become more effective at trawling the research literature and finding the right things, but not relying on ChatGPT to tell you what the right things are. You are telling the AI what the right, you giving it examples of the things you're looking for, and it helps you just navigate that ever-growing literature that is really hard for our students and our younger researchers to navigate. And there are many other things, of course, we can do. We heard about the financial challenges the sector is facing. Of course, we are looking at, what are things that we can make easier when some of our applicants, some of them I heard apply for up to 50 programs, not choosing the right thing. Can we help them navigate that and help our colleagues save themselves hours and hours of replying to inquiries which often go nowhere, and just creating those, using the AI to almost kind of supplement and complement skills we have and help people consume information in better ways. And of course, innovating in teaching. We are there. We're also kind of supporting a number of pilot projects that are trying to explore how can we actually use it better in teaching. I mean, I was hearing from a colleague in the business school, for example, that they like students using AI to do programming because he doesn't teach programming. He teaches financial analysis, and he wants the students to focus on understanding the figures from the firms and not focus on learning a programming language because they will not become programmers. So I think it's a really great opportunity to rethink also what we want students to learn and where we want to take the future of education and of our institution in the longer term. So we're slowly kind of getting to the end of our conversation. So obviously this is a very complex topic that will keep us occupied for many years to come, and nobody has a crystal ball. But I think, I hope our conversation has kind of given a bit of opened a window into how we are trying to proceed with both courage and care to navigate this very uncertain future. There are big challenges ahead. Some of them are very practical. Sir Peter spoke about the university becoming inclusive and widening participation. We have to think about what that means in the world of AI. We've opened up, we've made sure all our students have access to the currently available large language models free of charge, and they don't have to pay to use them, and also get more secure access to those through the university, so that our data is not used to train these models. We have to think about how we want to influence public debates, how we can help government make the right decisions. We heard about the AI Opportunities Plan, but of course, how we can actually turn AI into not only economic growth, but also societally equitable outcomes for the country is going to be hard to navigate. I think tonight we really have a great opportunity to have this conversation with all of you, to make you a part of that conversation. It's only by engaging with our alumni and with our friends around the world that we can learn more, and to also thank you for your continued support, and to work with you to identify new opportunities to work with each other and to benefit from your connections, your work in your respective areas. And so I'd just like to close by thanking Shannon and Kenny for what I think has been a very stimulating conversation, and give them a round of applause.